The problem that I have with this show, the one thing that I personally kind of found distasteful, was this concept within the show that you need to get increasingly violent in order to retain viewers. Hey everybody, my name is Nick. I'm a director and editor, and today I'm going to be talking about the Korean dark comedy slash drama, The 8 Show. The 8 Show is available now to watch on Netflix. It is about 8 people who are thinking of committing suicide for financial reasons, but then they are requisitioned to be on a mysterious TV show. The show allows contestants to pick a number, which corresponds to the rooms that they will stay in inside a strange, closed-off building. They are trapped in the building, and everything they do is filmed. The catch is that the contestants are not equal, and every floor up gets progressively more money as time goes on, and every room gets progressively bigger and has progressively more power. For example, the person on the 8th floor gets all the food and water to distribute to everyone else. They get paid by the minute, and 8 makes more a minute than 7 and more than 6 and so on. So because they're paid by how much time they are on the show, they naturally want to stay on this show as long as possible to accrue the most amount of money they can. But in order to gain more time on the show, they need to be entertaining. Time is given out if they do things that the audience finds entertaining. And the other catch to this is that to keep things more entertaining, they need to do more and more outrageous things to please the audience. So the structure of this show has an obvious similarity to another popular Korean drama that you may remember called Squid Game. But I think that this show in many ways is a lot better than Squid Game. The social critique, for example, in The 8 Show, I think is much more nuanced. It's not just saying, okay, poor people will do anything for money. This show actually builds in some interesting metaphors about social class and discusses a lot of interesting aspects of critiquing social class. I mean, it's sort of heavy-handed, but obviously this concept of floors is a metaphor for social standing or economic standing. But a lot of interesting social commentaries come out of this structure. The show talks about politics, social mobility, art, entertainment, revolutionary action, cooperation. I mean, not to say that I agree with all of the points that the show is making, but I do admire that the show set up some strong metaphors and really was trying to discuss interesting ideas in an entertaining way. You know, I think you can tell that the creators of this show have a message that they are passionate about conveying to the audience. And they want the audience to receive it. This is why they're trying to make this show entertaining. You can tell that this is the object of the show because actually one of the characters in it is called Floor 7. He lives on the 7th floor, and his background before he gets on the show was that he was a television show creator. He was a showrunner, and one of his professional failures was that he was always trying to make shows that had a message, but producers in this flashback scene, you see that a producer is kind of telling him that nobody wants to watch it because it's boring. So you need to give me something that's entertaining. It's all about entertainment. And I think this is a nod from the creators. They are represented in Floor 7 in this show, and that they're trying to get this message across, and they're trying to do it in an entertaining way, in a way that pleases a mass audience. So me and you, if you watch this show. I do, however, have some problems with this idea, and I definitely think that there's a lot of cynicism that is behind the creation of this show. There's a lot of, I think, disrespect for us as an audience. I think that there's a lot of this show that's saying like, oh, look at what you want to see, so I'm going to give it to you. And as a media consumer, I feel a little insulted when the person that's making a show for me is kind of telling me like, hey, you're disgusting and I believe not true. That's not what I want to see. But I'll get into a little bit more of that later. This show is basically in a lot of ways very meta in that it is commenting on what it is doing while also doing it, and then kind of asking questions and pointing fingers at the same time about like the fact that perhaps we aren't going to take in the message, we're only going to view this show for its sensationalist qualities, right? Now, what are some of the messages that they're trying to get across, which I think most people can? They do simplify the concepts to a strong degree. The metaphor of the floors is very clear. They talk about politics and how politics won't be able to change anything. I think this is kind of the thesis that they have about politics. And they do that through a scene where the people in the show have a vote that the 8th floor should take all of the garbage. But 8th floor, because 8th floor controls all the food, says, no, I'm not going to do it, and she just doesn't feed them so that she doesn't have to comply with the vote that they take. Now, this is an interesting idea, and it gets you thinking about politics, about how when people in lower classes try to mandate things of people of higher classes, they just skirt around it. And you can see this with things like carbon taxes or environmental protections, where the people in richer classes just pay to get out of it. And they talk a lot about revolution in this show, and about how if you treat a population so badly that they don't feel like they have anything to live for, of course they are going to resort to violence to try to overthrow that. One of my favorite commentaries that this show makes is when it talks about art. There is a scene towards the end where 8th floor has resorted to torturing everyone, and she's torturing all these people and just treating them horribly, and she's viewing what she's done, and then she gets so profoundly sad about it. She's like, oh my God, they're in so much pain, this is so sad. And instead of stopping their pain, fixing it, because she's the one who has all the control, instead of doing that, which she could do, she ends up creating art about it, creating an emotional, evocative piece of art. That is, when you look at the painting she makes, quite good, but it is so hollow. And I think it's such a scathing critique of a lot of the times what artists do, which is instead of creating something of substance, they muse about it in a profound way and try to get social credit for the fact that they feel the pain of other people, rather than trying to alleviate that pain. Now, part of me objects to it because I don't think that that's entirely true, but I think it's definitely an interesting commentary to make, and it's something that is sometimes true for sure, especially in the case of what I view to be very elitist art, like very expensive, highbrow, kind of quote unquote gallery art, things that are sold to the uber rich. I think this is a very, very kind of spot on critique about art. I thought it was very humorous the way that they set it up and execute it in the show. And the show also has this metaphor about social mobility. The fact that social mobility for the show seems like it is basically a false concept that is taught to people to keep them in line as well. At the end of the show, the characters are told they can pay to change rooms, but that they end up only paying for the instructions on how to change rooms, and they need to pay more money if they actually want to do it, which I think is a pretty, scathing critique of this idea of like the lie that everyone is sold, that like, yeah, you can fix your social standing. You just have to, buy this self-help book or work harder or do this. You have to pay even to get the knowledge to be able to do the thing that you're trying to do. I mean, it's interesting, and the changing of social classes is so much harder than it's made to seem at the outset. I would say the cynicism and the thing that kind of bothered me in the show was how First Floor was really given no agency and was set up as kind of a punching bag. This is an interesting conundrum when you're creating a piece of work about social class or critiquing our current economic system, because if, for example, you allow the lower classes to triumph over the higher classes, I think the reaction that a lot of viewers are going to have is, oh, well, that's not real. That can't actually happen. This is just a story they're telling us to make us feel better about the fact that we're stuck in our social class. It's not realistic. If you show the lower classes being completely crushed and how pathetic they are, which is what kind of this show leans towards, then you get another kind of similar thing of like, well, this is just showing us the futility of trying anything, and it's trying to take away our agency, and it's kind of making us feel like we have to be compliant, and if we try to ever engage in any kind of revolutionary action, it's going to be crushed. So it's a little bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, and it's very difficult to create a work of social critique on economic systems that has the desired effect. And I think that this show is aware of that, because of its stance on art, and because of kind of how it feels ambivalent and upset with almost itself at creating this show. So I think it's interesting in that regard, but I just think it's something that is a bit of a problem when you're trying to create a work like this, and I don't think you're going to please anybody. So what is the right way to portray this economic struggle that we know to be a reality, and that I think in this day and age, the people really want to see put on screen? I don't really know. I don't really know what's the responsible way. I don't really know what's the best way. I just think that perhaps doing what this show did as being very entertaining is maybe the right approach, because it gets a lot of people thinking about it. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's all you need to do. The problem that I have with this show, the one thing that I personally kind of found distasteful, was this concept within the show that you need to get increasingly violent in order to retain viewers. This is what I was talking about with how the creators of this show felt a little bit of disgust towards us as the audience. Now, I'm sure that what they kind of portray in this would actually happen. If you were to have a show where you needed to do things that were shocking, more and more shocking things would be done in order to retain attention. I mean, you can see it in our current media landscape and the way that things are. You can also see counterfactuals to that idea. You can see things that are more banal and more dry, like the fact that people on YouTube can just like talk and people will watch that. You know, there's lots of different ways that something can be entertaining. So I kind of wished the show had explored that a little more, of like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if like the people in the 8 show ended up making like a commentary show about the 8 show in order to keep, you know, different kinds of viewers. So like when they go into their room, they like talk about what they did that day. I mean, is that interesting as a show? Like, is that interesting for plot events within the show? Maybe not, but within the show, okay, I'm confusing myself now. Within the show, I think that audiences would respond to that. I guess what I'm kind of getting at is that the sadism within the show becomes a bit too much. And the evidence that this is not like a true thing is that as the sadism increased, I found myself getting a lot more uncomfortable and actually wanting to turn this Netflix show off. So it was kind of disproving itself in real time. When the show really devolves into like very intense forms of torture, I was not really comfortable. I didn't want to watch it anymore. I was thinking, okay, now this show is just getting bad. I don't like it. I don't want to watch torture pornography. Some people do, I suppose, and I suppose that within the world of the show, those are the people that like this thing. But I kind of am skeptical that this is as popular as they make it out to be. I think that that instead of just sticking with this simplistic viewpoint that entertainment just needs to get more extreme, so extreme, that they could have done something a little bit more interesting with that. For example, the torture that ends up happening with Floor 8, the ways in which she tortures people, ends up being fairly boring in my opinion, and an audience wouldn't really want to just watch people sitting there being forced to stay awake. So it would be interesting if she did try to execute this plan and then find that people are not interested anymore. And wouldn't it be an interesting point to make, to say like, wow, we've taken it so far to this extreme of torture and whatever that we've actually bored everyone. And what we need to do now is bring it back to something simpler, bring it back to story, bring it back to maybe just having everybody sit around and tell the story of how they got there. And that it becomes entertaining to people again. Now, is this a little cheesy and maudlin? Yeah, I suppose. Maybe that would anger people, but I guess I'm just a cheesy guy and that's the kind of thing that I like. What I really just want to say is that portraying an evolution of taste and being a little bit more nuanced about it would be more interesting to me. You know, I used to really love like violent stuff when I was a teenager, and then as I grew up and I got more mature, I don't really want to see that stuff that much anymore. I want to see it less than I did before. Something that I just thought from a kind of plausible plot standpoint was a little annoying was that the violence was always so strong in this, and that I found myself often thinking like, well, they would just be dead. There's points where they get hit in the head with a bat like every single day to entertain the audience, and it's like, if you're getting hit in the head with a baseball bat every day, you're gonna sustain like life-threatening head injuries and hemorrhages, especially if you're in a place where there's no medical care, like no real medical care. You know, people getting shot in the leg and then living. It's just like, there's a rule in the show where nobody's allowed to die, but they do things that would probably kill most people so often. I mean, it's just a little ridiculous and it's just kind of silly. And I just wish that that there was more realism in my silly Korean dark comedy. Come on. Let me know, what did you think of the 8th show? Did you like it better than Squid Game like I did? Did you think it was worse? Do you appreciate over-the-top violence, or do you think that it's a little bit too much these days? What do you think about class and social mobility? These are a lot of questions. Please write your answers in the comments, but be nice, because I'm a nice guy and we can prove everybody wrong, and just be nice on the internet. That's what I think we can do. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching Mint Volcano. Bye-bye.